morning and welcome to the January 23rd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. I am Blanny Miller, Chair of the Commission. Please note a change in the timing for the meeting today. Today we have a hard stop at 11 o'clock. This 11 o'clock meeting stop time is to allow for a special meeting of the City Council in these chambers this morning, immediately after this meeting. So given our early stop time, I would ask everyone today to please be efficient in your comments and avoid redundancy so that we can hear from as many viewpoints on as many cases as possible today. We start every meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda today? Seeing none. Next on our agenda is committee reports. The two items in committee reports are directly related to restructuring our committee assignments and schedules. This committee restructuring would typically be covered under today's agenda item G1, report of the chair. But I'm going to move this item, the report of the chair, to the top of our agenda so that our committee reports can make more sense. So starting off with item G1, report of the chair, with new committees. At our retreat last year, Commissioner Bennett raised the good idea of consolidating the work of our three committees down to two committees in order to improve attendance and our ability to achieve a quorum at those meetings. As a result, we reviewed the options for recognizing our committee work between two committees, one committee for text change and one for everything else. We considered changing the Commission's rules of procedures to accommodate this change, but ultimately we decided we could achieve our goals by restructuring committee assignments by an act of the chair and without changing our bylaws. This will allow for the Commission to have extra flexibility in the inevitable event that its membership and workload changes in the future. Accordingly, pursuant to our bylaws, as chair, I am restructuring our committee assignments as follows. The Text Change Committee will be comprised of 5 members, with Commissioner Nicole Bennett as chair, and the other 4 members will be Commissioner C.J. Mann, Brian O'Haver, Reeves Peeler, and Dean Rains. The Strategic Planning Committee will also be comprised of 5 members, with Roberta Fox as chair, and Commissioners Jennifer Lampman, L.T. McCrimmon, Blanny Miller, and Dwight Otwell. The Infrastructure and Mobility Committee will now be comprised of only 3 members, with C.J. Mann as chair, and Blanny Miller and Brian O'Haver making up the other 2 members, or the remaining members. The Text Change Committee schedule will also change. The meetings will now be held on the 3rd Wednesday of every month at 4 o'clock. The Strategic Planning Committee schedule will change as well. The meeting will now be held on the 2nd Wednesday of every month from 3 to 4 o'clock. The Mobility and Infrastructure Committee will continue to stand on the 4th Thursday from 3 to 4 o'clock. However, it will not meet unless items are specifically referred by the full commission. Are there any questions on those committee assignments or clarifications? Seeing none, thank you. Then moving on to committee reports. We have 2 items from the Text Change Committee. We heard each of these items for the first time at our Text Change Committee meeting last week on January 16th. Our then Text Change Committee Chair, Roberta Fox, was chairing that meeting and I believe may have a report on those 2 items.
Absolutely. The 2 items the Text Change Committee heard were TC 323, the Clean Transportation Ordinance. This is a text change to amend the UDO to meet some of the city's sustainability goals. And then also TC 723, which is an amendment, a citizen-initiated amendment to the Mordecai NCOD. Both items are reported out with no recommendation so that we can set a new date and transfer over to the new committee structure.
Thank you. So at this meeting, our goal is to notice the new committee meeting and when these 2 items will be held. Given that the new committee meeting date is the 3rd Wednesday of the month, that would be February 21st. Is that correct, staff? Okay. So without objection, I would like to send these items back to the Text Change Committee for its next regular meeting on Wednesday, February 21st at 4 p.m. Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to old business, there are 4 items on the agenda today. For these items, the commission has already received a full staff presentation, applicant presentation, and heard from the public. Our focus today will be on any updates or changes to that case since our last meeting. The first item is D1, case Z3623 at South Saunders Street. This case is to change approximately 2.01 acres from IX3 to CX20 conditional use. We first heard this case at our November 28th meeting, and the case was deferred to allow the applicant time to submit revised conditions. The applicant has submitted those signed revised conditions, so no additional changes may be made to the case, and we must vote on it as it appears today. So I will turn to Matthew Burns for a brief presentation from staff focusing on updates from our last meeting.
Good morning, Planning Commission members. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. The request has changed significantly since the case first appeared before you. We've received signed conditions which add several more prohibited uses, limited construction to 15 stories, and establish standards for a development qualifying as a Tier 3 site plan. And your deadline for action is January 27th. As a quick reminder, since this case hasn't been here since November, this site is near the Fuller Heights neighborhood and Dorothea Dix Park, south of downtown Raleigh. The site is the current home of the Toxic Customs motorcycle shop. Changes to this case's conditions are underlined. The applicant has expanded the list of prohibited uses, which previously only prohibited cemeteries. And the trip budget condition, which limits morning trips to 196 and evening trips to 213, has not changed. Condition number 3 limits building heights to no greater than 15 stories. And condition 4 is fairly lengthy and takes up the next several slides. The first part of this condition addresses hybrid frontage, and it prohibits private on-site vehicular parking between South Saunders right-of-way and the building facade. It also establishes a build-to range of 0 to 50 feet along South Saunders Street and Prospect Avenue, respectively. And for South Saunders Street, at least 50% of the lot width is required to have a building facade within those ranges. Along Prospect, it's 25% of the lot width. The hybrid frontage condition also requires at least one street-facing entrance within 100 feet of the right-of-way along South Saunders and Prospect Avenue, respectively. Finally, the hybrid frontage condition also requires direct pedestrian access from the public sidewalk on both streets to these street-facing entrances. Since publication of this meeting's agenda, the applicant has added an exception to the build-to and pedestrian access requirements along Prospect Avenue, which is shown in this slide with the star. This is in response to comments from Urban Forestry that direct pedestrian access between a building, specifically an apartment building type, and Prospect Avenue could impact tree conservation areas. The EDU requires tree conservation areas be provided for sites greater than or equal to 2 acres, qualifying as a Tier 2 or Tier 3 site plan. And the area of conservation would be 10% for the requested zoning district. However, tree conservation areas in conflict with zoning frontages are not required to be protected. Therefore, this condition would mean that the tree conservation area takes priority over those build-to requirements that I just listed. Moving on to affordable housing, this condition will require that the property owner dedicate 1% of units as affordable for households earning 80% AMI, up to 80% AMI for 10 years, or pay a contribution in lieu of dedicating affordable units at a rate of $40,000 per unit. Next, Tier 3 site plan would require development to use at least one type of green stormwater infrastructure measure labeled with educational signage, and this could include a bioretention area, permeable pavers, rainwater harvesting, green roof, or a planter box. And finally, a Tier 3 site plan would require the property owner to install a bike share station within the right-of-way in a location agreed upon with the City of Raleigh, and prior to the first CO is issued for whichever building is closest to the proposed station. Since you first heard this case, the entitlement table has not changed. However, I wanted to reiterate that the proposed conditions now limit building height to 15 stories in addition to the trip budget. And the affordability analysis has also changed, as the proposal now includes subsidized units for a development that qualifies as a Tier 3 site plan. The request is consistent with the regional mixed-use future land use map designation. The request is inconsistent with the urban format. However, as I mentioned, development as a Tier 3 site plan would require a hybrid frontage. And overall, the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the inconsistent policies are largely related to urban pattern, density transitions, and urban frontage, since the site is close to the Fuller Heights neighborhood. And your deadline for action is January 27th. And let me know if you have any questions before discussing the case.
Thank you very much. We have already received public comment on this case, but so I can get a sense, by show of hands, is anyone here today who wishes to speak on this case or the proposed changes and any other item that was not discussed previously? Thank you very much. We'll probably have some for you. Okay, then with that, seeing no other public comment, we will turn it back to the table for discussion. Are there questions and comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Harababa.
Could you please go back to the tree conservation clause that came up? I don't remember reading about that, and I don't quite understand what's going on.
Yeah, sure. So when the applicant submitted the unsigned revised conditions, Urban Forestry pointed out that due to the size of the site, being just over 2 acres, since this condition would apply a hybrid frontage, tree conservation areas per the UDO are not required to be protected, and there is also no maximum build-to setback range for an apartment building type. Therefore, their suggestion was if there would be a conflict between a potential tree conservation area upon development as a Tier 2 or Tier 3 site plan. Therefore, the applicant added this condition, which would mean the tree conservation area would take priority over the build-to requirements, specifically for Prospect Avenue.
Is there any indication, it says if it cannot be satisfied, like, so do we have any kind of idea whether the conditions can be satisfied otherwise, or is that reasonable to expect that we would not get the pedestrian access from the frontage, and that we would probably see a tree conservation area here? And I'm looking at the trees here. Did Urban Forestry have any kind of indication of what trees and the quality of the trees present?
No, not that we discussed. As far as the satisfying this requirement, I'll probably turn it over to the applicant to speak a little bit more about this particular condition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Morris with Longleaf Law Partners, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302. Here on behalf of the applicant, I think an aerial image might be good here to, yep, that'll work. So you can see, this is Prospect Avenue along the southern portion. So that's all we're talking about. And so obviously what Urban Forestry noted was essentially there's this stand of trees right here that, you know, if a site plan over 2 acres came in, there is a tree survey would have to be conducted, and there may be qualifying trees located in that area. They must, because there is not a full-fledged frontage applied to the zoning, that exempts you wholesale from TCA if you have an urban frontage. But because we have not applied a full urban frontage and instead are just doing it through zoning conditions, we don't get that full full-fledged exception to the TCA. So essentially, we have to meet the build-to requirements and the TCA requirements, which is usually not the case. It's usually one or the other. And so pretty much what we said is along Prospect Avenue, if any of those qualify pursuant to a tree survey as TCA area, and that TCA area renders it impossible essentially to meet that build-to percentage, that hybrid frontage requirement along Prospect falls away in favor of the tree conservation area. Who knows, this site could be combined into a larger assemblage and cut up in different ways. There's no saying exactly what size the site will ultimately be. But we'd also note that this corner piece, which is outside the scope of our rezoning, that was rezoned to 20 stories under the Baker roofing project. You know, in all likelihood, that will likely be part of, if and when the site's developed, that corner will be part of it. And that opens up a pretty substantial, portion that doesn't have trees. So it's hard to predict at this time. But, we took Urban Forestry's comments back to our clients who, talked through it, and we're quite confident that we're able, to move forward with the development under the conditions, but wanted to include that exception to put some.
So why not apply an urban frontage?
Right, because that goes back to the original kind of conversation that we had back in November about applying an urban frontage wholesale to the site. It's only a 2-acre site, and that would essentially require, a 3-sided building, and would require the building to be pushed up and would require urban kind of interface along Fuller Avenue that we discussed maybe wasn't even necessarily the goal here, that instead we were trying to kind of transition back towards Fuller Heights and actually create more separation rather than a build-to. So that would require like active uses, build-to, all that sort of stuff along Fuller Heights, which generally we, generally considered was not a priority. Rather having the urban interface and kind of frontage prioritized primarily along South Saunders. When you look at Prospect Avenue, you kind of have it may get the urban form if it's doable, or if there is TCA there, that TCA will take precedent. And then along the rear, it's just, ordinary UDO, that if, again, a large stand of trees there, so you just kind of be dealing with ordinary UDO tree conservation. So it really is a sort of transition around the property, if you will. You've got full urban form along South Saunders, and it kind of transitions back.
A couple follow-up questions then. I believe the build-to in the conditions is now proposed to be 50 feet.
Right.
I think most of the urban frontages have a much smaller build-to requirement, and this is a suburban requirement that allows some sort of parking. What kind of parking will be allowed if private parking is prohibited?
Only on-street public parking that would be associated with the required streetscape.
Okay, so street
So
parking
no
would-
surface parking of any kind on private property between the building and South Saunders Street. So you would be required to have that urban interface there.
So why the larger setback?
I believe we took, I'll defer to staff's urban limited 50 feet, and I believe that was what was used in the Baker roofing assemblage, which is UL. I do believe that we took from that. I may be incorrect. I know like shop front and some of the more intensive, like true downtown frontages, drop it down to 20 feet.
Yeah, I was happy with the percentage coverage. The 50% seems
Right.
to match the urban, the limited, but I thought that,
We could maybe, if we don't have the urban limited frontage standards handy, but I know it's,
thank you.
yeah, that would be great. And just as a reminder that the kind of large assemblage surrounding us here, the Baker roofing, that's that urban limited frontage. So we were really just trying to match that, and also, that's what applies on that corner as well. So really just trying to have a kind of uniformity with the surrounding zoning.
Any follow-up questions from that?
I'm good for now, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions and comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Peeler.
Yeah, this is a question I had last time when this was here in December, I believe. But on staff, excuse me, got a frog in my throat today. Might come up again. On staff report, it said it is consistent with regional mixed use. And the question I'd had was, in a comp plan, the different height recommendations for regional mixed use. To me, this looked like it was possibly a core transit area, but then also because of how it backs up to Fuller Heights neighborhood. It also seemed like it was potentially an edge area because it's within 150 feet of low to moderate density. So it kind of seemed conflicting to me. And I was just curious if staff had any follow-ups on that. Because, you know, the edge area for this would recommend a max of, I believe, 3 stories. So I just was curious because it seemed like a pretty significant conflict in the recommended heights.
I would have to go back and look at my staff report to pull that together. I apologize for not having an answer for you on the fly.
Chair, I had a follow-up question, if you will.
Sure, from Commissioner Peelers.
No, to my own.
Okay,
Are they looking into Commissioner Peelers?
I was going to say, I think maybe Bynum was going to, no? Okay. I think he's looking into Commissioner Peelers, but in the meantime,
I'm looking
I'm happy.
for
Sorry.
through the frontages.
yes. Is that a follow-up from Commissioner
Mine
Peelers? Yes.
kind of goes along with
Okay, great.
Commissioner Peelers. So I think that's my big concern about this one, is it feels like we're boxing in that Fuller Heights community with these high-rises. I know that was a concern with the other rezoning for me as well. So I'll be curious to hear the response to Commissioner Peelers' question, because that's my main concern is the impacts to the Fuller Heights community.
Yes, so looking at the different frontage options, Parkway requires a minimum 50-foot building setback and parking setback, whereas a parking limited would be variable. An urban limit between 0 and 20 feet for primary street and side street, with a 50% of the building width being in that range.
Does that answer your question?
I thought that was in reference to what
I
Dwight
think that was in reference to Dwight sorry, as well. That's,
remark. I think you read the policy correctly, and how you choose to apply that as a planning commission is really up to you. If you don't agree with how staff has interpreted it, we interpreted it as consistent. If you don't, I think you would just want to note that in your conversation at the table or in your motion.
Okay, I mean, I think my comment was more of a question to staff, like, how is that interpreted? Because I don't know how staff would interpret something that would conflict between those two. So I was just curious of how y'all come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, he interpreted it as consistent based on the regional mixed-use designation and the heights associated with that in LU2. And I think based on how the staff report reads, let that take precedence over the neighborhood proximity. Now, if you choose to interpret differently, again, as a body, you don't have to agree with staff.
Okay.
any additional follow-up on comments or thoughts on that topic from the commissioners?
We're ready to just kind of quickly respond
Sure.
to Commissioner Otwell, and one quick comment to Commissioner Reeves's point. We can't make any changes at this point, but we're willing to match the 20-foot of the urban limited on both Prospect and South Saunders Street. And just, yeah, we believe that we agree with the staff report. The site's located along South Saunders, which is one of the most intensive mixed-use streets in the city of Raleigh, regional mixed use just outside of downtown, limiting to 3 stories, that type of edge. We think this is far more urban in its context than what is being contemplated by those edge designations.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the commissioners?
I did want to comment. I'm thankful for the developer for offering on-site affordable housing here. It's nice that we're seeing that come up in more and more rezonings. I did just want to comment. I wish developers would consider more years, because 10 years of affordability is a very short time. Most people need affordable housing for longer than 10 years. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you.
I do have one follow-up comment.
Yes, Commissioner Otwell.
Not a follow-up, completely new comment.
Okay.
Pardon me.
I'll allow it.
I attended the last Stormwater Management Advisory Commission meeting, and one of their current orders of business is to develop a list of recommended green stormwater infrastructure applications, because the way that a lot of the conditions are written, there is a great deal of variability in the effectiveness of what could be what is required. So we don't have that list, and we've talked about that in the past at this table about not having good recommendations for GSI. So I would hope to include in any kind of motion that the applicant continue to work with the stormwater staff and maybe get some of those in front of council to continue to develop the green stormwater infrastructure. It's I think it's a good faith effort, but there's been some work done, and they might be able to get more specific by the time this gets through council.
Thank you.
Just to respond to Commissioner Peeler, your question about the heights. So my analysis of the inconsistencies, the Dix Edge area plan specifically lists that for developments asking for larger heights, in this case, they should provide substantial public benefits. And some of those things include affordability, enhanced public spaces, streetscapes, stormwater mitigation, which several of which are reflected in the revised conditions. So my thought here was they're requesting more height, but since the Dix Edge plan calls for kind of like a give and take for more height, more public benefits, that was my thinking, just to kind of contextualize that a little bit, despite its proximity to Fuller Heights.
Thank you. And I wasn't trying to put you on the spot with that question either. I just was curious from the last meeting, because I'm trying to understand the different categories of regional mixed use. But thank you for responding with that.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And would the applicant like to respond to the comments about the affordable housing or the clarifying this green stormwater infrastructure?
Absolutely. We're happy to continue working with our district counselor to make sure we have the most appropriate affordable housing condition as this case moves forward, and also absolutely happy to work with the folks in stormwater to see if there's any updates or any more specific types of language that could be included in the condition. And yeah, we're absolutely happy to engage in both of those efforts between now and City Council.
Thank you. So, Commissioner O'Haver.
I have a question for staff. Excuse me. I don't see any area in the conditions where they're talking about setbacks along Fuller Street, which is the street between the residence and the west side of the property. Prospect Avenue keeps being brought up. Is that just to the south? Because it appears in IMAPs that Prospect turns into South Saunders as it crosses over Dawson. So my question to staff is on Fuller Street, it looks like the setback would be 0 feet to 6 feet per the zoning. Is that correct?
For Fuller Street.
On IMAPs, that's the street to the west of the parcel between there and the neighborhood.
I will double check the setback.
I'm just looking at IMAPs. Fuller Street's right here.
Right. I think it dead ends right there.
It does, but I'm wondering what that setback is
Just
along that area,
Yeah, so
that whole property line.
Because it does go over that little bit.
But even if there's a building built right here.
So we've had that. So generally, you can do a 0, or you have to have a minimum of 6 between 0 and 6.
Yeah, so under the existing IX zoning, primary street setback would be 3 feet
Right.
Side street would be 0 or 6.
Right.
And under the proposed zoning, it would be dependent on the building type.
So what does that end up along the western parcel line? I mean, to Commissioner Bennett's comment, and again, from the last meeting, some of my comments about these existing neighborhoods, I'm all about infilling here. I understand the intensity of South Saunders. I'm 100% in favor of the project. I'm a little bit concerned about how close a 15-story building can be built along that western parcel with some existing houses there. So I'm trying to confirm that it's 0 to 6 feet along that parcel line, even though Fuller Street dead ends. But I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, so in the apartment building type for a side or rear lot line would be 0 or 6 feet under the requested CX.
We've got the tree conservation area there, I guess, if it
Quite possibly.
applies.
And I would just note too, it's not shown right here, but there is a 15-foot protected area located behind. So those, you can see the cul-de-sac there at Fuller Heights. There's a 15-foot strip of just protected area that's associated with their subdivision. And then you have the Fuller Street right-of-way, which is itself, I believe, a 55-foot right-of-way. So then you have at least, and that will be developed and improved into a, UDO standard street along Fuller. And then only on the outside of that right-of-way towards our property do you then have the ordinary CX setbacks, which is you can do a 0-foot lot line setback there, or you can do a minimum of 6. So it could be much greater than 6. In all likelihood, the building will, per the conditions, has to be kind of pushed up against South Saunders. But to answer your question, it could be a 0 or 6, anything greater than 6 feet.
And again, for staff, I guess, at that height, is there a step back that's required in the building at a certain height on apartment buildings at 15 stories?
I'm not sure what the step back would be or if it would be required.
I believe at the 12th story, there is a step back requirement under the UDO at the 12th story. So there would be at least, if it were to go to 15, there would be at least one form-based step back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments and questions from the commissioners? So I am hearing that if we were to make a motion today, we'd want to include a recommendation to, a few recommendations. One, to accept the applicant's offer to reduce setbacks along South Saunders and Prospect to 20 feet. And the second and third recommendations to work with staff to clarify and improve the conditions related to green stormwater infrastructure and affordable housing. Are there any other comments and questions from commissioners? Then I'd like to entertain a motion.
I can go ahead and try to put that together. All right, I'm going to start with the text. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 23, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. In addition, the commission recommends acceptance of the applicant's offer to reduce build to requirements along South Saunders to 20 feet, and requests the applicant continue to coordinate with staff to develop conditions more appropriate for affordable housing and green stormwater infrastructure.
Thank you, and thank you for that clarification. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner McCrimmon has seconded. Any further comments or discussion? Those in favor, by show of hands. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-2. Would the two voting against the motion like to add a comment and clarification for the reason?
I'm concerned about the proximity to Fuller Heights. I support the items that we noted for the applicant to continue coordination with, but I just think 15 stories is too high next to that neighborhood. It's being boxed in gradually.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, same for me, and also I'd just like to see better conditions for affordable housing offered up.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Chair Miller, I just want to make sure, again, I had a similar concern to Commissioner Bennett, so I just want to make sure that gets in there because I think there's possibility to continue to improve that condition wherever the applicant went. Oh, so hopefully we can potentially have some additional conversation around that. But I think as a whole, the benefit of the project is one I can support.
Okay. I think I'll be able to quote it verbatim if we can. Okay, thank you very much. And moving on to case D2, rezoning case Z3923 at Nowell Road. This case is to change approximately 1.9 acres from R4 to RX4, parking limited with conditions. We first heard this case at our January 9th meeting, and it was deferred to this meeting to allow the applicant time to submit revised conditions. Have we received those signed
You have
conditions?
received, we have received them signed, yes.
Fantastic. Then we have a new set of signed conditions, and there can be no additional changes to this case, and we have to vote on it as it appears today. Thank you. I will now turn to Sarah Shaughnessy for
Sure.
presentation.
Good morning, Sarah Shaughnessy, Raleigh Planning and Development. So just give you a quick update on this case. Again, this is 2 parcels on the east side of Nowell Road. The request is to rezone from R4 to residential mixed use 4 stories with parking limited frontage and then conditions, which I'll review now. So you saw most of these conditions on January 9th. The applicant has made 3 main changes. The difference between the draft conditions that were published with the agenda and then the final conditions they submitted were only minor changes in response to staff feedback. So the first change since the conditions you saw on January 9th was to add that only residential uses should be allowed as principal uses, allowing additional accessory uses, and that was in response to a commissioner's comment. And then the 2 new conditions they've added were a restriction on height to 55 feet. 65 feet would otherwise be allowed in a residential mixed-use district with a 4-story limit. And then they've also added a cross-access condition requiring a stub out to 1 parcel to the north of the site and 1 to the south. So those are the changes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And we've already received public comment on this case, but so I can get a sense by show of hands, is there anyone here today who wishes to speak on the proposed changes or any other aspect of this case? Yes. If you are interested, please come to the front. Looks like we have a couple. Is anyone here to speak in opposition of this case versus in favor? I think we have perhaps two in favor. Okay, then I would like to grant an additional 3 minutes to each side. And we'll start with the applicant and those in favor. Thank you.
Good morning, Isabel Maddox here. Recently been brought into this team. We have made some changes which I think are very positive. I want Tony Tate, our landscape architect, to discuss those with you in detail because I do think they're important changes. Tony, can you come up and just discuss the changes?
Good morning, Tony Tate, 5011 South Park Drive in Durham. I'll go over the main changes that we made. On number 1, as a response to Commission's request, we made a change to allow retail uses as a accessory use, so that we have that opportunity to come up, we can take advantage of that. So we did make that change. And number 3, there was some words that were changed around, nothing really substantial in that comment. Number 4 is the same, the building setback of 15 feet. In condition number 5, we reduced the height of the building to 55 feet in response to both neighbor commentary. We've had several conversations with the adjoining neighbors. There was a concern here on the commission about that height, and so I believe the allowable height for a 4-story building is 68 feet. So we reduced the height of the building by 13 feet, and a 3-story building would be allowed 50. So we're only 5 feet higher than what a 3-story would be allowed. Throwing in there, obviously, across the street, there's potential for an 80-foot 5-story building, and the 3-story building on the corner of Chapel Hill and Nowell with the eaves on the height above the 3 stories, it's approximately 48 to 50 feet as a 3-story building. So we reduced the height of the building in response to those concerns. And then the 6th one just reflects the stubbing to the north and the south, and make sure we stub to the adjacent properties as we feel like is appropriate. There's a lot of surrounding properties, but we're going to stub to the north and the south to make access easier for those parcels. Building setback, we didn't change, but I wanted to note that the neighborhood concern, I think, didn't realize that we were dedicating additional right-of-way as part of the project to meet the urban frontage standards. So I think it's half of a 74-foot divided avenue. So we're adding 7 feet to the right-of-way, then an additional 15 feet. So we're trying to maintain that urban frontage, parking behind the building, so it's a clean look out there in Nowell. So if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Or do you have a follow-up as well, Ms. Maddox?
Good. I think Tony summed it up well, but I do think it's important to note that drop in the height. The 13 feet, I think the staff member said 65. We think it's 68 is the max for 4 stories, but this would be 55. And the point that Tony made about the right-of-way, the 15 feet will be after we dedicate right-of-way. So I think there was some concern that what if we said 15 feet and then there's some right-of-way taken, and then we would really be right on top of the street. But it's really after we dedicate.
Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in opposition of this project? Seeing none, we will now bring it back to the table for questions from our commissioners. Seeing none?
Based on the recommended changes, I'm actually ready to support this project.
Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion. Yes. Commissioner Fox.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 23rd, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner O'Haver seconded.
I'd like to second it.
Yep. Any further discussion or debate on the merits? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? Any opposed? That passes 9-0.
Chair Miller, again, if I
much.
could, since we just were talking about this in the previous project, I'd like to thank the applicant for looking at that height and taking into consideration the adjoining parcels and residences. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item D3, case Z4123 at Buffalo Road. This case is to change approximately 27.41 acres from CX3 with conditions to CX4 with conditions. We first heard this case at our December 12th meeting, and this case was deferred to this meeting to allow the applicant time to submit revised conditions related to the fire station dedication. The applicant has submitted those revised signed conditions, so no additional changes may be made, and we must vote on the case as it appears today. Is there a recusal for this case? Yes. And without objection, I would like to recuse Commissioner Fox from this case, as she has been recused previously as well. Thank you very much. I will now turn to Bronwyn Reedus for a staff presentation focusing on updates since our last meeting.
Good morning. I'm Hannah Reckow.
Oh, Hannah
Planning
Reckow.
and
Excuse me, I
Development,
didn't
standing in
look
for
up.
Bronwyn this morning.
Good morning, Hannah.
Yeah, so this is a case Z4123 request to rezone from CX3 CU to CX4 CU. There is the one new condition that has been added, condition F, which pertains to provision of a parcel of land, at least 2 acres in size, for use as a fire public safety station. It's been received in time to be considered at this meeting, and I don't believe it affects the overall entitlement on the site or the comp plan consistency. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. We've already received public comment on this case, but so I can get a sense by show of hands, is there anyone here who would like to speak at any of the proposed changes or any other aspect? Yes, seeing one, I believe. I'd like to add 3 minutes for both sides and start with the applicant and those in favor.
Good morning, Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box. Well, actually, I've changed my address. I'm with a new law firm, Nichols and Crampton. I failed to say that before.
Congratulations.
3700 Glenwood Avenue. I just want to add, this was a condition that had been a legacy condition in the prior rezoning case, and we had not included it in this case because we've already agreed to, we've already committed to do this in the other case, and it's actually on a subdivision plan that's in process. So we didn't think it was necessary to add it here. I think the Planning Commission wanted to see it, so we've added it. But I think this will be, the fire station site will be, dedicated to the city before this this property even gets developed. So hopefully, adding it in this case is to Planning Commission's liking. Certainly happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll move to those opposed. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in opposition of this project? And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table, to our planning commissioners. Any questions or comments, follow-up? I want to thank the applicant for providing that condition. Anything else?
Yeah, I would also applaud that. So I'm ready to make a motion in support. If there's no other comments. If I can get my cheat sheet ready. So I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 23rd, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you very much. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Otwell has seconded. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, by show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 8-0. Thank you very much. We'll welcome Commissioner Fox back to the stage. Yes.
I'm having trouble hearing people at that mic.
Okay.
I don't know if it's just me. I've been home a lot with my son listening to very loud music. So it may be me, but it seems like I'm hearing everybody up here fine, but I'm not hearing out of that mic well.
I'm sure we've got a sound producer in the background, perhaps taking notes. Thank you very much. We'll see what we can do. And for those that come up to the podium, please also try to make sure you speak into the microphone. Fantastic. Thank you. Moving on to case D4, or item D4, case Z5023 at Varsity Drive. This case is to change approximately 3 acres from residential mixed use, 5 stories, green frontage with conditional use with special residential parking overlay district to residential mixed use, 7 stories, urban limited with conditions. We first heard this case at our January 9th meeting, and it was deferred to this meeting to allow the applicant to submit revised conditions. The applicant has submitted those conditions, so no additional changes may be made, and we must vote on the case as it appears today. And now we'll turn to Hannah Reckow for a brief staff presentation focusing on updates since our last meeting.
Yes, so as was mentioned, the zoning conditions have been amended. I can go through those now. Previously, there was just one zoning condition that prohibited the cemetery land use. Additional land uses, you can see here, have been added to that condition. And I'll make a small note that there was a change made between the draft and signed conditions, just to correct a typo in that condition. And then 2 new zoning conditions were added. One prohibits vinyl siding and EIFS as use as a building siding material, and a 3rd condition pertaining to provision of affordable units. So this condition requires at least 1% of all the site plan approved dwelling units to be dedicated as affordable for households earning no more than 80% of area median income for at least 10 years. There's also the possibility of paying the city a fee in lieu of providing those units of $40,000 per unit. So these zoning conditions don't change kind of the entitlement outside of those now prohibited land uses. And the overall consistency Analysis remains the same, inconsistent with the future land use map, consistent with urban form, consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Wanted to note one policy that was added, that housing 2.17, which wants to see housing across incomes provided near transit. This is within half a mile of future BRT and currently has transit access, would increase market rate number of units, and with the new condition, affordable to 80% area median income. I'll note that generally low income is considered 60% AMI below, but the policy does speak to parts of the conditions now speak to parts of that policy. And then the inconsistent policies remain the same as well. Height and kind of density transition are the issues. And then, as a reminder, your deadline for action is in March. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. We have already received public comment on this case, but by show of hands, is there anyone here who wishes to speak on the proposed changes or any other aspect of this case? I see one. Any others? Then in that case, I will allot 3 minutes to both sides for additional public comment, and we'll start with the applicant and those in favor.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Planning Commission. Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners. Again, we were here 2 weeks ago, and in response to some comments from Commissioner Raines, we added additional uses to the prohibited use list. We also prohibited some of the building siding materials. At the last meeting, I also mentioned to you that the applicant was in conversations with our district councilor about adding an affordable housing condition as well as a bike share condition. But because those conversations were ongoing, we didn't feel comfortable committing to at that time. But we did add, we did want to show the commission that we were committed to adding an affordable housing condition, so we have done that. We are still in conversations with our district councilor about that condition as well as the potential for a bike share condition. But again, that's something we anticipate addressing at the city council level. So I just want to remind Planning Commission, just address that one inconsistency about the height, that this site is surrounded by, surrounded by mixed-use zoning. This site sits about 10 to 20 feet below adjacent properties. We will have tree conservation area in this area here, providing an additional transition. Areas across the street are zoned for 7 and 12 stories across Avon Ferry. Again, there was also a recent case in October 2022 for 7 stories up in this area here. So we believe we're consistent and compatible with the surrounding area, and would just emphasize that this property is located in an area that is walkable to Centennial Campus, main campus, Mission Valley Shopping Center. There are sidewalks connecting the site to all of those places, as well as there are multiple Go Raleigh routes and Wolf Line routes that connect this site to other parts of the city as well. And so we think, locating hundreds of more people in this location is a net positive. So here to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment for those opposed. If there's anyone in opposition to this project, you can come to the podium now. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table for additional questions and comments from our commissioners. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. I wasn't at the previous meeting, so I apologize if this has already been answered, but given what you just said, Mr. Birch, about the proximity of the site to all of those different amenities, why are boarding houses and emergency shelters prohibited?
So we had the current conditions that are applicable to the case under the old zoning case prohibit those uses, and we had a request at the last meeting that we essentially mirror those prohibited uses. And so that was why we essentially applied that same list.
Okay. So I noted when I was going through this case that the new consistency was added about equitable housing around transit. So I looked that up because I wanted to see exactly what it said. And it says, ensure that housing exists for residents at a range of incomes, including very low-income households near bus rapid transit stations. I think prohibiting housing types that could address low-income households actually makes this inconsistent with that policy. I do acknowledge the affordable housing condition, but it's 80% AMI. So I don't think it addresses what the policy says about including very low-income households. I don't think very low-income households are included here. So I would say it's inconsistent with equitable housing around transit. And I just want to make sure, I really, really want to make sure when we're looking at these policies that we aren't just throwing around the word equitable, that we're looking at what the policy says and that the policy specifically says very low-income households. And if this isn't addressing that, then I don't want us to be misleading and suggest that this is consistent with equitable housing around transit, given that those are the words used for that particular policy. I'm not saying that it isn't appealing to a diverse income group, but I don't think it's consistent with that particular policy.
Understood. And, Commissioner Bennett, I just, one on the use, just on the use question. I believe boarding house, the use regulations, essentially, that is a converted use of a formerly single-family home. Like, that's what that use is in the UDO. That's how it's defined. So I don't believe that the inclusion of that is not really prohibiting anything because there's not a single-family home on the property today. But just want to make that clarification. I know you still mentioned the very low income as well as the emergency shelter, but just wanted to make you aware of that. Yeah, thanks.
May I follow up on that?
Yes, Commissioner.
Given that explanation, Mr. Birch, about the boarding house, would you be amenable to removing the emergency shelter type B language?
Yes, I believe we can. Yes, there's no reason we can't do that. That's fine.
Thank you.
Yep, thank
You'd
you.
have to do that after you make your recommendation.
Yes, understood.
Yeah, but we again anticipate making changes to conditions at that next stage, and so we will incorporate that as well.
Question, I'm looking at, and I was not here when this was heard the first time, so forgive me, this was already addressed, but under housing supply and affordability, it says it's naturally occurring affordable housing present at the site. Yes, I believe it's the Carolyn Apartments are currently at this site, and staff report says 24 units are affordable at 80% AMI currently. Does that mean that's all of the units there? 24 is all of them, or just 24 of the units on site are affordable?
My count of the units on the property is that there are 30 units.
Okay.
I don't know if you have anything to add.
That's my understanding as well, is that the 24, based on that 2021 survey, were found to be at that affordability rate, but there's more units than that on the site.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just on that, I think Raleigh really needs its naturally occurring affordable housing, especially when it's multifamily like this. So, you know, I would not be in favor of destroying that unless there was some kind of provision to, you know, match the same proportion of affordable units that currently sit there at the same level. And you know, this is likely student housing, I would think, being located where it is. So maybe not as much as other parts of Raleigh, but when we also do that, if there are projects where we're destroying affordable housing, naturally occurring affordable housing and building new affordable housing, we also need a plan to get current residents into that new housing without them being displaced. So those are the kind of conditions I would want to see to support something like this, where there's, you know, again, naturally occurring multifamily affordable housing.
So just to clarify, what is the condition that you wanted to see?
I mean, I would want to see the same proportion of affordability that's currently there.
Same proportion, not same number of units.
Yeah, proportion, yeah. If there's 24 of the 30, I mean, I would think we would want to at least match that, given the affordability crisis we're in, and also some kind of provision to get the people currently living there right of first refusal into the new units.
On the right of first refusal, is that something that can be included in a zoning condition? I think we've looked at that before.
I'm happy to address kind of just the practicality of that
Sure.
as well. So and we touched on it a little bit at the last meeting. I know you were here. So the property was, built out in the mid-'60s under, I believe it was R6 zoning. And that's why you see the 30 units on about 5 acres of property. And then in 2017, it was rezoned to 5 stories. That was by a different developer that had the property under contract at the time, right? And so, right, in a way, the decision to redevelop this for higher density, right, has been made or was made, right? And I think 210 units are allowed into the property under the current conditions, which is a little bit different than maybe what you all have seen in other parts of the city where you're still dealing with a property zoned R6 that is built out at its max density, and you're kind of seeing the first rezoning, of that to something higher. But again, because of that decision to RX5, I feel like we're in a little bit different situation. And from a kind of right of first refusal, et cetera, I think someone kind of acknowledged that this is primarily occupied by students or those attending the university or working at the university. No one can really do a right of first refusal just given the time period between when something is, kind of closed up, then the construction phase, right? I mean, that's often a 3-year period. And so just practically, we're not able to do that. But we are still, again, in conversations with and we will be with the larger council on the affordability piece. So.
Thank you very much. And could staff remind me under the existing versus proposed rezoning, what percentage of affordable housing is required under the existing zoning?
I don't believe there is a zoning condition on the site currently that requires any affordable units.
So if it were built out today, there would be, to the just existing entitlement, there would be no affordable housing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Potentially, nothing
No
required.
requirement for
Yeah.
affordable housing. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
One other question. I noticed that 10% of the population is considered linguistically isolated. Was there any type of targeted outreach to address any language barriers? Because I also noted that at one of the public meetings, no one showed up, and at the other one, there were very few people. So I don't know if that had anything to do with the language barrier, but I did notice that 10%.
No, we did not do any kind of targeted with a bilingual or any other type of notice.
Okay. I just want to say again, I've said it many times, but I'll keep saying it. I think it's important that when we see in the demographic data, this isn't necessarily directed at the applicant because you did what you were required to do, but when we see that there is a higher percentage of people who may need language assistance than the average for the city, then we should have some sort of effort to identify what those languages are and make sure we are reaching those residents, business owners in their language. Because then it comes to us that no one showed up at a meeting, and it could be that they didn't understand the meeting notice that they received.
Thank you. Staff, I know there was something in process with that at the city. Does staff have an update on where that is?
It's ongoing.
Okay. Thank you.
If
Right,
I
Commissioner
could
Hager.
just follow up Commissioner Bennett's comment. It's more regularly that we're suggesting to the applicant, there's nothing we can do about it this time. Yes, they followed the rules. I think even not only when it's linguistic barriers, when there's some pretty intense development, we've suggested to the applicants that they go above and beyond, reaching back out and trying to make sure we dot those I's and cross those T's before they get to council. So I would just like to suggest to the applicant that they might consider that prior to meeting with council, because I think Ms. Bennett's comment is on point.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I'd like to offer my support to Commissioner Bennett's comments. I was concerned about the boarding house clause. We see that a lot in a bunch of these conditions, and it comes up, and I don't know that I know of any boarding houses. This seems like an artifact of old conditions that keeps getting recycled. I'd be happy to see it go away. I'd like to know what an emergency shelter type B is before just throwing it out wholesale. But I'd also be interested in seeing school and special care facility removed from the prohibitions as well, unless there are compelling reasons to include that as well.
So I think the first question was perhaps for staff to clarify the
what's
emergency
a-
shelters use.
What's a type B emergency emergency shelter type B?
Let's bring up the definition. So, defined as a facility providing temporary sleeping facilities for not more than 10 displaced persons at one time.
Thank you. I don't think that I see any problem having that around.
Yeah, I believe they agreed to consider removing that one.
Would the applicant like to respond to the question of removing the prohibition on schools or special care facilities?
Again, the applicant is fine with that. Yeah, just want to make sure, yeah, special care facility, type B, and the school use. Right.
Thank you.
So was boarding house a part of that too?
It's sort of irrelevant.
I mean,
It's
we-
irrelevant in this case, but if you'd
Yes.
like to remove it,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, but because there's not any single-family detached house, and that, because of the definition of boarding house, really can't be done here anyway, but we can remove that as well, as long as the commission's fine with that. Thanks.
Making a note. Okay, any other guests? Commissioner Lampman.
Yeah, just looking at the site, and this is the classic naturally occurring affordable housing, and it's going away. It's a little hard to see that there is opportunity for people to find that type of housing that can suit their needs in the area, particularly how expensive Raleigh is to live. I do like the comments, hearing the comments about additional support for affordable housing. I'd hate to see this be converted where likely a lot of folks kind of rely on this type of housing. Granted, it's in the student area. I don't know the rent roll and how many students are actually living here versus families. But this is the classic affordable housing or naturally occurring affordable housing. So I'd hate to see it go.
Thank you very much for your comments. Other comments from the commissioners? It sounds like if there is a motion to approve, it would also include recommendations related to improving conditions around affordable housing and adding a bike share and removing the prohibition on the boarding house, emergency shelter, school, and special care facility uses. Any other comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Fox.
Would you like to say something, Commissioner Bennett?
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes. Could we also include a recommendation that if we recommend approval, that when it goes for public hearing, that some effort is made to understand what the language barrier is and that the notice, excellent, thank you.
Yes, sorry, I missed. I don't know what we'd be asking for specifically, but I think you have a good idea. So I'll take it from you. Take it away. Yes.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 23rd, 2024, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. I have the correct one here. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement. Furthermore, as the applicant has offered, this approval is contingent on the removal of some of the prohibited uses, including emergency shelter type B, schools, special care facility, and boarding house. Considering improving some of the affordable housing conditions, adding a bike share, and adding additional low English proficiency outreach at the time of public hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett has seconded. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? That motion passes 7-2. And so I can add, I think I know specific, I have an idea for the record, but would either person who voted against this like to provide more specific feedback other than what's already been provided?
I would just like to see more substantial commitments to affordable housing, since this is something that's available right now, and the replacement cost of paying into a fund or doing anything else is just not meeting the actual supply that's there now.
Same for me.
Thank you. Paying into a fund. Okay. Thank you very much. And then with that, we will move on to new business. There are 2 items on the agenda today. These requests have not appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda, so we will hear a full staff presentation and applicant presentation, and we will hear from the public. The first item is E1, rezoning case Z1823 at Wilson Street and Garner Road. This case is to change approximately 20.72 acres from R10 to RX4 with conditions. We will now turn to Hannah Reckow for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Good morning, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So this is an assemblage of parcels, a little under 21 acres, currently split zoned with R10 and R6, requesting RX4 CU. You can see the surrounding zoning, especially to the north and east, prominently residential, R10, R6, and there is some mixed-use zoning to the south and west. Those uses are primarily office uses, and then there's a NC Highway Patrol facility across Garner Road, and an existing detached subdivision off to the east. You can see kind of the assemblage of parcels here. There's 2 right-of-ways, Wilson Street and Ujama Drive that butt up against the site. Mostly forested currently. A few of the parcels have houses on them. And you can see kind of what those views look like from Garner Road, Wilson Street, and Ujama Drive. There are a few proposed zoning conditions. One provides a minimum of 10 affordable units on the site, affordable to 60% area median income for 30 years. Another condition specifies that only residential uses will be permitted north of Wilson Street and east of the existing USGS Blue Line stream. And then a trip budget condition has been added. A 4th condition was included in the draft unsigned version and removed in response to staff comment. It specifies a discussion with staff that would happen anyways. So for that reason, it was removed. So the entitlement, I'm going from residential districts to a residential mixed-use district. So an increase in housing types and number of housing units that would be permitted, and then the small provision in RX for non-residential uses, which is a max of 4,000 square feet and has to locate at the corner of 2 public streets, would also be allowed. So this area has a lower than average walk and bike score, no transit score provided, and a higher transportation cost index and a slightly higher than average, about average job proximity compared to the city. There is one bus route to a Garner, has hourly service down Garner Road. And then the request would add to the possible housing supply. It includes a zoning condition requiring some affordable units and generally permits smaller units and smaller lots, and is within that one transit route. You can see this, some information about kind of area demographics and land use history. There's a much higher than average proportion of residents in this area who are people of color, higher than average proportion of residents who are low income, and the housing costs, median rent has increased about twice as fast as the city average. So the future land use map designation for this site is moderate scale residential. RX4 is a little taller and allows a greater intensity of residential use that is envisioned in moderate scale. RX4 is closer to the medium scale designation. So this request is inconsistent with that recommendation. It is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. You can see some comprehensive plan consistent policies here and inconsistent policies cited here. Your deadline for action is at the end of March. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to public comment for those in support. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak, and I would ask all speakers to come to the podium and introduce themselves and try to speak directly into the microphone. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Tamara Waitman with BA Folk. I'm representing the property owners in this matter. I have a map here that shows the affected parcels. They have been to the top. There is a new development going in that has over 300 townhomes. So the density in the area is improving overall. This will add additional affordable housing units that are going to be guaranteed for 30 years. I heard you guys talking about the fact that 10 years doesn't seem quite adequate. So 30 years is certainly a good deal better. You can see this is closer up, a little bit of a view of the properties. I wish I had a pointer. I want to make sure that you know where.
You can draw on the screen with your finger. How about that?
Technology is wonderful. All right, I will show you momentarily. So, well, these right here are the ones that, and right in here are the affordable housing units. Oh, how do I make it go back away?
I think Hannah's helping to the rescue.
Thank you. Most of this has already been shown by Hannah, but this shows where the R10 and R6 lines are. And there's a natural stream here. That black line there is a stream, and that is basically how the designation was made between the two zoning areas originally. And what you'll see in a moment is that that same streamline is what's used for us to make some of our conditions. If you have any questions about city limits and such, we can go to that, but this is the full text of the rezoning condition for number 1. But sort of getting to the meat of that, what it says is that for lots 719 and 723, the developer is going to provide a minimum of 10 low-income affordable housing rental units. The maximum affordable rent limits per efficiency bedroom size and income limits adjustment for family size is not to exceed 60% of the area median income for a period of no less than 30 years. So that beats your 80% and also the 10-year. The affordable rent and income limits are going to follow the affordable housing standards that are determined annually by the City of Raleigh Housing and Neighborhoods Department. And there will be an affordable housing deed restriction form that is filed and recorded in the property's chain to ensure that that is adhered to over the 30 years. The second condition, this one is going to ensure that only residential use, even though we have the RX4 designation we're asking for, only residential use will occur in certain portions. And that's going to be in the areas that are blue above. And remember, I talked about that streamline before. What this has here, this line across lot 800 Wilson Street, it's going to follow that actual streamline. So rather than use something that could change over time, the zoning is not something that remains the same. It follows the streamline, and that's the USGS streamline that is on their maps. So to the west and south of Wilson Street, so the west of the stream and south of Wilson Street, that's going to be the area where mixed use is allowed. And all the blue areas will be residential only, with 719 and 723 being the designated affordable housing units. Oh, I don't know how to go back. I figured it out. So also we do have a condition regarding traffic. It's pretty standard that you do the traffic anyway, but we went ahead and have the specifics there for the AM peak hour being 191 total trips, and in the PM, 215 total trips. If you have any questions about any of the maps, I can go back to those.
Any other comments for us at this time?
I do have a question about the map. You were pointing out where the affordable housing units will be. Do you already have a plan of what kind of housing will be built? I'm talking size-wise, whether it's apartments or townhomes throughout the site.
So that will be determined with the city and Passage Homes, who are the owners of those specific parcels of property.
Okay.
But they are an organization committed to affordable housing.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. I guess what I'm asking is throughout the site, all the residential pictured here in the blue, will this be like townhouses, single-family, apartments? Does the developer know yet?
Yeah, so there are some ideas, but nothing is concrete yet. We'll be doing the subdivision planning next.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Given this is the public hearing portion, I want to make sure if there's other times. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Are there any other comments for us during this portion? We'll continue to have questions once we bring it back to the table.
I'd like to introduce David Phillips. He is one of the property owners, an interested party in this.
Hello, David Phillips, Raleigh resident, 5408 Phillipsburg Drive. Don't take anything into that, it's just where my rental happens to be. Wanted to give you some clarity on the topics there to start with, and any other questions you come up with in the entire project. But in speaking with Passage Home previously and seeing the product that they currently have at the corner of Wilson Street and Garner Road, which are apartment types, very nice looking, well kept, maintained, those will probably, I can't put words in their mouth or guarantee, but speaking with the previous president and seeing what their mission statement is, they will probably be similar types of apartment units there, not townhomes. Now, for the remainder of the site, throughout the site, we have a mix of all housing types, mostly apartments, up in the area at the Garner Road touching and down to the creek in that area that's designated by the small area plan, which drove our decision for this RX4. That does allow for commercial and retail spaces on the bottom floor. It doesn't designate the bottom floor, but it is in our intention to do a bottom floor and maybe make some type of, I looked around the area and see what that area needs, and it's really a food desert. So I'm thinking that a nice anchor store, grocery store type, might be an appropriate thing there, especially with Haydenstone coming in. That's a 312 townhome pure development to our north, and our units. It's a perfect opportunity for everyone to lift that up and put in some good anchor stores there on the Garner Road frontage, and then apartments would be above that. Moving toward the creek and just across the creek, as Tamara explained, we cross the creek to the east, going toward Roxy Street and Ujima down there. That becomes residential pure, 4 stories max. And if you go to the north, up on 725 Wilson Street, abutting the affordable housing location, that also is residential pure and does not allow for any RX, any mixed use in those areas. The total combined housing types has 5 single-family detached, 17 townhome, and the remainder being apartments with the mixed-use component in that certain small area plan. Any further questions?
We'll do a question and answer in just a moment, but are there any other comments? Is there anyone else in the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment for those in opposition. I'm sorry, Commissioner Lampman.
Apologies. I didn't look at the applicant name prior to this case. I sit on the board of Passage Home. I must recuse myself, so thank you. I
Yes,
appreciate it.
of course. Without objection, we'd like to recuse Commissioner Lampman, yes, from this case. And with public comment for those in opposition, those opposed will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Do we have any other members of the public who would like to speak in opposition? Well, then, seeing none, we will bring it back to the table. Thank you for that awkward delay. I want to make sure we do our public hearing properly. Okay, then bringing it back to the table for additional discussion, questions, comments for staff or for the applicant. Yes, Commissioner Reitz.
Thanks, Chair Miller. Just comments. I don't have any questions really for staff or the applicant, but looking back at the map AP GT1, the Garner Tryon map, they looked at core areas and transition areas, and this applicant, the site property, is fully within what they call the transition area, which recommends 3 stories. However, this was adopted in 2003, and things have changed since then. I think the applicant's map shown on the screen here, where they're willing to dedicate residential only, even at a higher level than the map policy guidance shows, is beneficial to the community. So I also like the inclusion of some retail, especially in this area that is known to be a food desert. So in general, I think I support this application without asking to reduce height along adjacent residential areas. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Other comments? Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I have my standard comment that I would like to see the language for prohibiting anything but residential uses amended to include anything but primary residential uses, so that we continue to allow secondary uses like ACUs and in-home offices for certain professions to be allowed.
The applicant like to respond to that comment about removing that prohibition?
We fully support that as well. We followed the previous actions of the commission as well as the council in this respect, to especially since COVID times and what we call the after COVID times now, so that if someone has candle shop was one of the places that they were talking about, and then a presentation was made. So yes, we fully support that statement.
Thank you very much. Pulling that item out for follow-up as well. Yes, Commissioner Bennett?
Just a comment. I had a question about the height inconsistency, but Commissioner Raines just walked me through it, so thank you for that. So that addressed that. Thank you for the affordable housing provision and just the thoughtfulness of this application. I really appreciate it. I do. And I look forward to seeing more applications throughout the city like this. So thank you. I'm prepared to support this.
One question I had is I was looking at the staff report, and I believe it was found inconsistent with managing our growth over the lack of parks. And it looks like Biltmore Hills is the closest park, which is only accessible by car about 1.6 miles away. Being that this would, I believe, need annexation and close to 21 acres, would the applicant consider adding a condition about some kind of pocket park or something on site? We've seen that in other rezoning similar to this recently, and staff did point it out, lack of a walkable, bikeable, or transit-friendly public space nearby. So I'm just curious of your thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you for the comment. We did indeed address that with staff, and our original staff member, Hannah did a great presentation, by the way, but our original staff member, Bronwyn On Point person, did take a greenway request from a staff reviewer, and then by the time it worked itself through the process, they went, it's kind of like that bridge to nowhere in Alaska, because there are no plans to continue either to the north or the south from our area. So that was one of our 6 conditions, and that was removed by staff. They just said it just doesn't make sense. Now, we do have 10% open space in this area already with the, it's kind of mandatory, it's built in really with pointing out the creeks. There's a major creek and a supporting branch of that creek, and both of those are blue line streams on the USGS map. So we have a 50-foot buffer on each side, 50 foot from top of creek bank all the way along that entire waterway. So we, in effect, already have a built-in natural area, a park, if you will. It won't be designated as a park, nothing that the city will have to upkeep, but it can't be modified. It has to remain in nature. So walk down to the creek, watch the squirrels play, little break between apartment buildings. It's a built-in. You can't cut the trees down in there. You have to have a special permit from the city to cut a tree down in there, and there are various particular reasons in the UDO, like a diseased or dying tree. One got hit by lightning, it's a safety hazard. Other than that, they're going to remain in there, so kind of built-in park all the way through the middle.
Thank you very much. All right. Other questions, comments?
I guess I have a follow-up question to that, and you segued it well with the stream. And also looking at the report, it mentions needing, I'm sorry, I've just accidentally flipped away from it, but the staff report mentions needing a flood study, and it looks like there's no stormwater conditions. I was looking on IMAPs too, and it looks like quite a bit of flood-prone soils throughout the lots. So I was just curious what your plans are with that, and I'm not a stormwater expert, so I'm not sure what the flood study entails for us moving forward. So that's kind of a 2-part question, one for you all and one for staff.
Yeah.
So just to start, I did change to this map just so that you can see, and it's kind of faint, but I did want you to be able to see both creeks, because the original one that we had up only showed the line where we were going to have the residential line. But this shows that there are the 2 areas, and so there will be the 50 feet on both sides of both of those.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to turn to staff to see if they could provide some information about the stormwater conditions as they exist and what rezoning conditions might be appropriate here.
Yes, so the requirements of a flood study are that both the existing and proposed conditions of the site be analyzed to determine the base flood elevation of the watercourse, and that will determine the flood protection elevations for the buildings. And so it should be, a matter of public health and safety on what the actual water surface rise will be on that water course. Those provisions can be found in UDO section 9.3. And it does require a detailed engineering study signed and sealed by an engineer.
And when is that type of study required?
Either at preliminary subdivision or administrative site review.
So it will be reviewed and determined whether that's required at that time?
It will be a requirement of the site based on the linear footage of stream present. And it will be required to be submitted with the preliminary subdivision review.
Thank you. And any conditions that are required as a result with respect to where buildings are built and that kind of thing will
Correct. And it
be
will
binding
be
as a result of that study?
Yes, the results of the study will be that regulatory floodplain elevation, and that will need to be present on all maps for recording after that study is done.
Thank you. And are there any additional rezoning conditions that could assist in that process, or is it pretty much covered by what occurs at site plan?
What occurs at site plan.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very much. Other questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Haber.
Similar to Commissioner Otwell, I'm going to go back to sort of my standard comments here. My first question, though, is for staff. Should I presume that Ujamaa Drive is going to be connected to Wilson Street? Is there a requirement through staff that there needs to be connectivity through the site, or is the plans that remains a dead-end street? I'm certain they do.
Good morning, Margaret Tartala, Transportation. So the exact connection will be determined when they do their site review or subdivision review. I can tell you that there was previously a site review done for the site, and Ujamaa did get extended through Wilson Street.
Okay, great. I guess my next question then, well, not for transportation, probably for staff. In Ms. Maddox's case on Nowell Road, they said that the 4-story was 68 foot, and they reduced it to a 55 foot, which was only 5 feet higher than 3-story. Staff report says 3-story here is a 45 foot height max. So and it's going to play back into this case, staff reports.
Sure, and I don't know, I don't have the exact spot you're looking at yet in the staff report, but 3 stories in a residential district. So for example, the existing zoning here is 45 feet. And I believe in a mixed-use district, if it's 3 stories, it's 50 feet. So it's a different foot measurement.
So I'm just going to mention again my concern, especially if, I don't know how the site plan will lay out with that sort of southeasterly blue line stream. But if they're trying to maximize conditions here, again, my concern is the existing residents with a 68-foot high apartment building that's probably built up to get out of the stream, to stay out of the flood-prone conditions, as well as Ujamaa continues through wherever it does. There's some existing homes there. And so again, I would like to see the applicant consider a condition that along those existing residential areas, there's different consideration taken for the height of the proposed building. So I don't know if the applicant willing to consider that, but that's what my concern is.
Would the applicant like to respond?
Certainly, yes. And we've considered this as well. In looking at Haddonstone's development to the north here with their 312-unit townhomes, they also butt up against some same exact subdivisions there at Ricochet, and the height difference when it all comes down to said and done. Most of these buildings, the residential units along Ricochet and along Ujamaa, Most, not all. There's some two-story mixed in there, but most of them are one-story. So no matter what you build there, it's going to be a kind of a Mutt and Jeff height situation there. Even if you build a two-story, it's twice as tall as the building that's there before. Our goal is to maximize our density as the city's area likes to see, and so we can get the most residents in a small area and conserve the land. So that's why we looked for the RX4 in height. Now, if it meet your request, I wouldn't see that it would be a problem to maximize the height down from a 50 to say a 43 or a 45 along these areas of abutting the eastern side. But in all reality, from my point of view, it doesn't really make that much difference. You know, if we're looking at the sun angle and in minutes of degree, we're going to get like two seconds of additional sunlight by dropping that height down. Now, what it does for the residents of that is we may have to have an 8-foot ceiling inside the apartment versus a 10-foot ceiling when accounting for the plenum space between the floors to stay inside of that lowered residence. So it might make a slightly inferior apartment product for those residents along the eastern side. But I would consider whatever you would see fit. Let me know it, and we will definitely consider it in either in front of the council or during the actual building permit side.
Well, I think there's been a couple of requests on changes of conditions that I think you're probably going to come back for anyways. The only areas I'm asking for a reduction in height is on those eastern boundaries directly adjacent to the existing homes. To your comment, if they're one story and we're building 4 stories right next to that, it's not so much about the sun. I'm not saying you need to reduce the height. I'm saying that people have been living there for a while, and I've made this comment before. You probably weren't here, but I've dealt with this personally as well. And I understand what happens when a 4-story building gets built right along an existing single-family home that's been there for 100 years. So that's my concern. Perhaps you scatter in some of those affordable housing units, so you're not, if they're, to your words, an inferior unit, then perhaps you don't congregate all of the affordable housing in one area. You mix it into some of the existing, which is probably not a bad idea anyway. So I'm only concerned about those eastern property lines, not saying you need to reduce the height. I'm concerned about the scale of a 4-story building, and the setbacks are, again, 0 to 6 feet of an existing 1-story structure. Those are my concerns.
Okay, well,
So
I
less
understand.
about height, more about setbacks and scale?
Again, I think there's multiple ways you can
Okay,
add a
gotcha.
condition to address it. I'm
Not
not
exclusive of height.
explaining how you need to do it, because I understand there are economics, there are site conditions. I understand there are lots of factors that go into me just throwing out, I want you to reduce the height of the building. I'm just trying to articulate to you that my concern is the scale and the proximity. So I think there are multiple ways that you can address that, but I'll leave that up to you.
Certainly. Heard, comprehended, and we will consider an eastern condition to see what might be able to be done. We'll examine all possibilities.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Fox.
I wanted to offer also as a follow-up, one other way we might be able to address that is with increased buffers or just articulating a buffer on that edge instead of affecting the height and potential number of units that you would be able to achieve.
Absolutely. It's a buffer. Anyways, I think there are multiple ways.
Multiple ways, and including the buffer will be one. Maybe it's a multiple of the thing. Maybe it's not one silver bullet. It's, a plethora of them. So we'll definitely consider it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
I'll just say in response to Commissioner O'Haver's comment about scattering the affordable housing, I always like to see that too, but I'm assuming in this case it's because those are the parcels that Passage Homes owns? Okay. But I do typically support scattering throughout.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Peeler?
I just wanted to follow up on my earlier comment because I remembered the example I was talking about. We, in terms of a pocket park and allowing some kind of public congregation space, we'd seen a case earlier this year that was well east of Raleigh that needed an annexation, where I believe something like 5 or 6% of the acreage was set aside for a, not necessarily to have public amenities, but to be a public gathering space, not just a private flood buffer zone. That's the kind of thing that I think somewhere like this, where it's a 1.5-mile drive to the nearest public gathering space, I think would be really, really crucial for something that's isolated for kids, youth that might live there. To even bike to something is kind of impossible, like a basketball court or anything. So that's something I'd really like to see in any kind of development that's going to be isolated like this.
So clarifying what exactly that would look like on a condition, or
What's that?
could you clarify what that would look like on a condition?
It would be a condition around, yes, setting aside public space that's part of the acreage as a percentage of it.
Is that
and
in
I
the-
was offering as an example, I think it was Z623, which was the Hodge Road assemblage that we did earlier.
As a percent
That's
of
something
the
that
acreage.
developer did, and I think did a really good job with it.
Is that in addition to the 10% required?
There's already a 10%.
Right, but that wouldn't necessarily be public space, it's just the flood buffer, correct?
I think the 10% is in addition to the flood buffer.
She's correct. But it's not public space though, right? It's private to the property?
It is not a dedicated park to the city, but it is designated by the UDO due to the type of housing. Anything townhomes and up in density requires 10% open space is the phrase they use. So, it could be dog park. It could be still owned by the HOA or the management of the apartment complex, and not a dedicated city expense.
True.
That is McCrimmon Park or something like that. That's named, but it still has the same effect. It always stays with 10% has to be open in this development, open space, no matter what type of building, where a building is put, those type of things. And to skip back one little step back to the affordable, another thought we had on the affordable versus the scattering out of is because Garner Road is where the bus route is. And this keeps, not only is it owned by Passage, but it keeps it in proximity to the bus route, which is critical. So that's another pre-thinking that we did on that matter.
Well taken, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, so it looks like we have, the applicant is going to return to the Planning Commission with at least 2 additional conditions. One about removing the prohibition on exclusively residential uses, to change it to also allow for accessory uses. And working with staff to create another condition about the scale of the building on to the east, directly abutting the single-family homes in that area. Are there additional comments and things we want to see at the next meeting? Well, then our next Planning Commission meeting is Tuesday, February 13th. That means that to be considered by the Planning Commission, new conditions would need to be submitted by Friday, February 9th. Would that provide the applicant?
Next Friday.
Next Friday.
Excuse me,
Signatures by
Friday
the
the
9th,
2nd.
unsigned by the 2nd.
Yes. Conditions by Friday, February 2nd, and signatures by Friday, February 9th. Would that provide the applicant enough time to make those revisions? Then with that, I would like to defer this case to our February 13th Planning Commission regular meeting to provide the applicant time to submit those additional revised conditions. Thank you very much. Looking at the time, yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Ask one quick question, please. It doesn't affect anything you just did, but we referenced a subdivision being built to the north of townhouses, and I'm just curious what the height is there.
The name of that subdivision is Haddonstone, and it is a Stanley Martin subdivision of 312 townhome pure residences with amenities, a pool and a clubhouse type of deal. And I think they just go I don't think they had any special condition for height. I think it stays inside of the R10 zoning that they have there on that they share the same split zoning that these parcels you just considered, the R6 to the east of the creek, and which I don't think they're doing anything with, and the R10 all the way up to Garner Road, and I think that stays at 45 feet tall,
Okay.
3-story townhomes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. The final item, E2, rezoning case Z5323. Unfortunately, we will not be able to hear that case today. Again, the city council, we have a hard stop this morning at 11 o'clock to provide this, because the city council needs to meet in these chambers this morning immediately after this meeting. So rezoning case Z5323 will be deferred to our next planning commission regular meeting, which is the first Tuesday in February, or February 13th. And my sincere apologies for the applicant who has stayed here this morning and will have to return on that day. But thank you very much for continuing to show up. On to our next item, approval of the minutes. We have one set of minutes from our January 9th, 2024 Planning Commission regular meeting. Do we have any comments on those minutes? Then, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner McCrimmon is seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 9-0. Okay. Moving on to other business, report of the chair. At the beginning of this meeting, I already covered the report of the chair for committee assignments, but we have 4 minutes, so for those who arrived later, I'd like to repeat the key highlights. Over the past several months, we've reviewed consolidating the work of our 3 committees down to 2 to improve attendance and achieve. We are, instead of changing our bylaws, we reviewed the options, and the committee reassignments can occur just by an act of the chair, and keeping the 3-committee structure in our bylaws will allow the commission to have extra flexibility in the inevitable event that its membership and workload changes in the future. So according to the bylaws, as chair, I've restructured our committees to be, the Text Change Committee will be comprised of 5 members, with Nicole Bennett as chair, and then CJ Mann, Brian O'Haver, Reeves Peeler, and Dean Rains. And the Strategic Planning Committee will be comprised of the other 5 members, with Roberta Fox as chair, Jennifer Lampman, LT McCrimmon, Blaney Miller, and Dwight Otwell. The Infrastructure and Mobility Committee will now be comprised of only 3 members, with CJ Mann as chair, Blaney Miller, and Brian O'Haver. The Text Change Committee's schedule will also change. The meetings will now be heard the third Wednesday of every month at 4 o'clock. The Strategic Planning Committee's schedule will change as well. The meetings will now be held the second Wednesday of every month at 3 o'clock. And the Infrastructure and Mobility Committee meeting will continue to stand on the 4th Thursday at 3 o'clock. However, it will not meet unless items are specifically referred by the full commission. So that is my report of the chair, and moving on to report of our members. Vice Chair Rains.
Thanks, Chair Miller. We do have for a committee of the whole, we have 2 cases for this Thursday, Z5123 and Z4023. So just to make sure we have a head count, who can attend this Thursday at 4 o'clock? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, perfect. We have a quorum.
I am expecting significant community interest in the Strickland Road request, so really would like to have a quorum.
Okay.
I'm going to try to be here. I have a work meeting, but I'm going to try to get here as soon as I can.
Thank you. We'll see you Thursday.
Well, are we looking to change the room?
We've reserved 303 as overflow,
Okay.
and you'll meet in 305 as usual. Mm-hmm.
And then I guess you'll just video it into the other room if they're...
Well, it's just so there's room, because there are 2 cases. So it should be, we'd have enough room, we would have enough room for whatever's not being discussed. Those folks can be in the other room, right?
Got
it.
Okay.
Let us know if anybody, since we are tight on quorum, let us know.
Yeah, that seemed like exactly 6, right?
Yes.
Who were the 6 again? 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay.
Apologies, I need to recuse myself from the Strickland Road presentation. So I will be there for the first case, but I will have to recuse myself for the second.
You would still count as quorum, so I would
Yes.
encourage you to remain present, please.
I will be, I will be
Super.
present. Oh,
Perfect.
so even if I can't vote, I will count
Yes.
towards quorum?
Your body in the room is quorum, whether or not you are presiding over the item.
Understood. All right.
Fantastic.
I will be there.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, moving on down the line. Commissioner Alba.
No report.
Thank you.
I believe with the new committee structures and committee schedule, strategic planning would meet on February 14th to have a very romantic discussion about the affordable housing location policy.
Wow.
Whoa.
That's Valentine's Day. That was a
Maybe I'll come
joke.
to that one.
For quorum for that, I have another board meeting that morning that might possibly run long.
Okay.
Just by show of hands, those that can attend that strategic planning meeting on February 14th at 3 o'clock, 3 to 4, only 1 hour.
That week, I will be out for surgery. I don't know if I'll be well enough to come in on that Wednesday.
Noted.
We need 3 for a quorum, and we had just 1.
I will do my best to be here. I'm blocking off time on my calendar now.
Thank you. Did you say Commissioner Alba?
I'm not a member, but.
You're in too? Okay. So and I might be able to be there. My other meeting starts at 10. It should be enough time, but I think it'll be a doozy, so we'll see. Yes.
Maybe we could hang loose on that and make a decision, not right now, but we'd have to make a decision by the 9th.
Excellent.
Because we'll publish
Yeah.
we'll publish the agendas on the 8th for your meeting on the 13th and the 14th.
The topic is near and dear to me, so I would love to
Right.
be able to participate.
You could also just say right now you're not going to talk about it until March.
Also acceptable. With
do
the
it.
question of a quorum, I would support moving it to the March meeting and not holding a romantic meeting on February 14th.
I second that. I second it.
Yes, the February meeting is canceled.
There you go.
February meeting would be canceled.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. Text change will meet Wednesday, February 21st at 4. Let's continue the tradition. Who can be there? 1, 2, 3. Wednesday, February 21st at 4. We need 3?
Yes.
We got 3. Okay. 2, I will also have to recuse from that Strickland Road rezoning, but I will be present for quorum. Yeah, cool. That's it for me.
Okay. Commissioner Peeler?
No report.
Thank you. Commissioner Haver?
Unfortunately, with the change in the time, I will not be able to attend the meeting on the 21st for text change. I already have something on my calendar. I can't move. I'm curious, though, a portion of that Mordecai zoning affects my own house. Am I moving forward? Is there a conflict of interest on this side? I'm certainly happy to make comment out there as a homeowner, but it's kind of curious. I don't know where I fall on that as far as conflict of interest. And we can talk about it offline if we need to, because it's already 11:03, because I can't make the text change meeting anyway, so.
I'll talk to you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Commissioner McCrimmon?
I think we've worked out any issues I've had, so thank you.
Thank you.
I have nothing.
Appreciate it.
I provided my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to report of the Assistant Director.
Sorry.
Yes.
Chairman, I just realized that the text change on the 21st, since we changed the date, I will have to excuse myself early from that meeting on February 21st.
How early?
An hour.
So 4 to 5?
Yep.
So we might lose quorum then.
An hour might be good. Up to you.
Can get through one. I don't know, Bynum is looking a little.
We just want to know before we publish the agenda if you're not going to meet.
And is anyone going to be here that wasn't, all 3 that were there last time?
Are no longer on the committee.
No longer on the committee.
Correct.
So
restart.
presentations, all that, you're basically going to start over.
Yep.
Okay.
Should we just move to March?
Because I think it's.
Think there are some deadlines for action or no on the text changes?
I'll have to
Yeah.
look.
Well, I'll talk to you offline then to see.
Let's keep it, and then if we need to cancel it, we'll cancel it. But we could at least get, hopefully, the,
Text change is 60 days?
no, 90, I don't think that changed.
90.
Yeah. Let's talk after we adjourn.
Deadline for action is March 16th. So probably worth hearing. Do I think you need to hear it? Or schedule a special one?
Or we could just discuss it at planning commission.
Okay,
That's cool.
great. Report of the assistant director.
I don't have anything beyond the very important quorum matters we have just discussed.
Thank you. Excellent. All right, then with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Not mic drop.